Kay? What are you doing? A few years ago, I made a video about the game Salting the Earth, the only visual novel I've ever played. I sang its praises to high hell and back for having a warm and heartfelt story and beefy sapphic orcs that make my little gay heart go aflutter. Because of my having a positive opinion about an otherwise vile subset of games, a lot of people went against my direct wishes to not recommend any more visual novels to me, and proceeded to recommend more visual novels to me. Gotta love when people just don't listen to what you gotta say, huh? In any case, I just want to say real quick that I have listened to and retained exactly none of the recommendations or, let's be real here, requests you guys gave me. And the game that I'm covering today was recommended by one of the few sources I can trust. My darling wife. So today we're talking about Haven. Not a visual novel per se, but the closest thing I've played to one after Salting the Earth, and I fucking love it. I love it so fucking much. I love the characters, the visuals, the gameplay, the very grounded story in a sci-fi setting, the theme of always moving forward with your life rather than struggling in vain to move back, and you knew this was coming, I love the delicious sapphic goodness. In this game, you play as U and K, a hot-headed engineer and a more grounded biologist, respectively. They're lovers who've run away into deep space to escape the society keeping them apart. Apparently, their government has a matchmaking system intended to pair mates together using quantum computing data analysis to find the best match, and they enforce the system forcefully, even resorting to brainwash to keep people with their designated mates. U and K, who are already in love at this point, said fuck your soulmate tropes and then flew off to a whole ass other planet just to be together. From there, they're just trying to figure out how to survive, discover the mystery behind the planet they've made a home on, and try to stay one step ahead of the Apiary, their government, trying to silence them and their love. You probably think this all sounds gay as hell, and you'd be correct. Although, that wasn't always the case. So, full disclaimer, for the first year of this game's existence, you could only play as a hetero couple, K being a guy, U being a girl. This was perhaps a wee bit contentious since the actual plot of the game, two lovers escaping the unjust system in order to be together, is a story more befitting of a gay couple. It just garnered some unintended implications about the developers, let's say. It didn't help that even in the vanilla game, U is confirmed to have two moms who are both in favor of the matchmaker system. Of course, the devs over at the game bakers realized this, saying they had a lot more ambitious ideas for the game, including a bunch of different couples of varying sexual orientations, but they were under the gun for time and they had to stick to just the one. I was tempted to say likely story when I heard this, but we do actually see concept art of these other characters in the whole ass art book that came out with this game, so I'm inclined to believe them. Sidebar, if anyone knows how I can get my hands on this art book, I would be very grateful. It's sold out on the Game Baker's website and no one on eBay is selling a copy. Please, please help me find this book or I will be very sad. As recompense, however, they released a free update to the game the following year that gives the couple a gender select, so you can play U and K as two women or two men. And that's great. It doesn't change the gameplay beyond voice actors and art assets, so you're not really missing anything by choosing one couple over the other. It's a solid addition and I'm glad they put it in. It really makes their claim that they did have more inclusivity planned to start seem more believable. So you can play as whichever couple you want from the very start, but of course, you all know me, I am all about that sapphic goodness, so I have several playthroughs of U and K as girlfriends. Plus, female K looks like Beta Luce. How could I not play as her? I will admit to having a bias. I'm not too proud to admit that. It's all the same story, so you aren't missing anything by choosing the straight or gay playthroughs beyond swapping pronouns and flavor text. That said, I would personally say that the voice talents for Lady U and K, Janine Haroni and Lexi-Ann Kendrick respectively, are slightly better than Ryan Hiley and Christopher Liu Kum Hoi. Again, that just might be my personal bias talking.
Who knows? Tomorrow could be the beginning of the long winter months. It could last for years. One more reason to stock up on apple juice.
Who knows? Tomorrow could be the beginning of the long winter months. Could last for years. One more reason to stock up on apple juice.
You know, always being right is not necessarily a good quality. On the contrary, many people find it very unappealing.
You know, always being right is not necessarily a good quality. On the contrary, many people find it very unappealing.
I will say though, I do think it's odd that you can't play as a female K and a male U. I mean, yeah, it's another hetero pairing technically, but I don't know. Something about this version of the couple just has more bisexual energy to it. Come on, let K have her short king. It'd be great. Maybe someone can mod it in. Okay, but updates and voice actors aside, what even is this game? Well, it's got visual novel elements, especially in presentation, but it's mostly a survival game with exploration and resource management. You collect food to cook, you collect plants to synthesize healing items, you collect energy crystals to make power-ups in combat, yeah, fast! And you collect old wreckage to rebuild your ship with. While you're doing all of that, the main characters U and K are overcoming obstacles and becoming closer as a couple. And you're doing all of this while traveling the world in perhaps the most satisfying way to travel I've ever experienced in a video game. Instead of walking, running, or even mounting up, you glide everywhere on these absolutely BIS hover boots, and they feel amazing. You're just zooming around islands on these things, discovering new places and resources, riding energy threads to gather fuel that sometimes take you up into the sky, all while you control so fucking smoothly. There's a wee bit of jank here and there, especially when you encounter cliff faces or tight corners, but beyond that, I can say with absolute certainty, I've never had this much fun just running around in a game before. There were times I would explore an island the long way around just because I loved gliding so much. And if that wasn't enough incentive to glide, doing so helps clear up these red splotches all over the islands called rust, which is polluting the planet's flora and fauna. Yeah, that's right, we're Super Mario Sunshine in this bitch. Only this time, we're cleaning up the levels by flying around in these sick-ass hover boots and beating up critters corrupted by the rust. Don't worry, you don't kill them, you just knock them out to pacify them with flow. You can even give them scritches as an apology. Look at them. Look at the apology scritches. It's so cute. And keep in mind, exploring and foraging and minor animal abuse is only half the game. The other half is, well, couple banter. Yeah, when you're not gathering resources or finding new islands with new things on them, you're watching these two be the most adorable couple on the planet.
It's not like there was a lot of competition.
You can trigger unique conversations by having a meal, hanging out on the couch, going to bed, camping, or just progressing the story. They can be playing cards, workshopping their ideas for a novel, talking about their past, gushing about engineering stuff or biology stuff, thinking about their futures as runaways, far from their old home and their families for the rest of their days. Or they could be playing dolls.
Cupcake.
And spoiler alert, this is how you level up. Yeah, just doing couple stuff fills up U and K's social link, which is what beefs your moves and your health. So there's incentive to check out as many of these talks as you can. You know, beyond the fact that it's just adorable.
Girl, you stuck your foot in a shell.
And you are just tripping over all these encounters so long as you're interacting with the world and your ship. So by the third act, you're fully leveled and fulfilled by the adorable couple stuff you just ingested. The fact that this is a love story and these two are a couple is entrenched into the mechanics of the game. There's just so many little things that just add up to so much. If you're gliding long enough without taking sharp turns, U and K hold hands. And if you do that long enough, you get an achievement. When you stand still for a bit, these two share a kiss that actually heals the both of them if they've taken any damage. Gathering seeds for their vegetable patch becomes a fun little contest where they compete to collect the most seeds.
Seed! Now we're 6-3. You're starting to feel the heat.
There are dialogue trees with a confidence metric. Don't worry, we'll get to those. It's even entrenched in the combat. Speaking of, this game has an interesting approach to combat. Instead of it being turn-based, real-time hack and slash, or MMO-style cooldown combat, it's more like wind-up combat. Everything you do requires time to charge, from melee attacks to range to shielding to using power-ups. The clincher to this, of course, is the fact that you're playing as both U and K. This gives you a few different strategies in combat. They can either attack one at a time, use duo attacks for more damage, one can block while the other one charges their next attack, they can res each other if one of them is KO'd. It's all pretty good stuff. The fact that you're controlling both of them lends itself to a more fast-paced combat than it would have been if it was just one of them. Which isn't to say it's terribly complex or difficult. No, you shouldn't run into anything that will give you serious trouble until about the middle of the game. The combat is fairly forgiving so long as you know what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, U and K will tell you what to do. In fact, the game itself is fairly forgiving on a lot of fronts. You get a radar once the world starts to open up, so it's very unlikely that you'll get lost. U and K will say out loud what they need to do or where they need to go, so it's unlikely you'll ever forget. Even if you lose a fight with some animals, you just set up camp to heal and rest and try again later. Yeah, Haven is not a difficult game. I mean, when you start a new game, they tell you up front that it's not a difficult game. But they do have the option in place to make the game even easier if you wanted to. The accessibility options here are pretty great in that respect. Again, this is a love story at the end of the day. They don't want any players who are just looking for a good story to hit a wall with some tricky boss or something. So yeah, you're gonna want an easy experience if that's all you're here for. That said, with as many times as I played this game, about 4 or 5 on the highest difficulty that I could, I don't think a hard mode would have been a bad idea. Maybe a mode where U and K don't remind the player what to do all the time, rust patches that respawn further from the end of the game, and maybe enemies that hit a little harder. I mean, the game is fine as it is, and the combat really isn't the meat of the game. I'm just saying difficulty options would have been nice both ways.
All right, I
guess it's time for me to do what I do best.
Snuggle?
Okay, McKay, but what about you and Kay as characters? Honestly, I love them. I love them as individuals, and I love them as a couple. I love all their little moments together, and I love how each major story beat affects their relationship. Kay especially is great in this game. She's excitable, she's optimistic, she's curious about the world around her, she approaches almost everything with a scientific curiosity. Like, seriously, you cannot turn her biologist brain off. She will literally find glowing slugs in a cave and then bring them home to study. She just picks their tiny little slimy asses up and says, "Yay, new research!" She's certainly the most level-headed of the two, but she's also the most wide-eyed and adventurous. She is endlessly loyal to those she cares about. Namely you. She is ride or die with this woman from start to finish, and it's so sweet. Kay's not even that concerned with the life she left behind just to be with you. That is how ride or die she is. And she's so adorably cringe at times, like when you asked her about the fact that she watches cartoons.
And also, Muffin and Cupcake is a cartoon about friendship above all. And it approaches its subject matter with great maturity and sincerity, which can be appreciated at any age.
Oh my god, Kay, you're so fucking cringe. I love you. This is one of the reasons I prefer playing the game with a lady Kay. Lexi Ann Kendrick has a fantastic voice for comedy.
I hope this is only the beginning, and that I'll have many more chances to almost die with you. He ate our friend's baby.
Cupcake, it's horrible. What's going on, Muffin?
I just need my immune system to acclimatize itself. My lady, I do declare these tapestries were hand-sewn from the utmost luxurious bath towels.
Interestingly enough, however, Kay seems curious about everything except herself. She's very upfront about her past, being raised as an orphan for as long as she can remember, until Yu's mom gave her a decent gig working for her company. She talks about what the orphanage was like, and what her field of study was, but she does so almost clinically at times. She didn't even think to see what her designated mate looked like until Yu asked her about it. There was no one notable from her past that she talks about apart from her late parents. We see her more enthused about certain aspects from her childhood, but that's all stuff that doesn't come up until that information affects the present situation, namely them living on the planet Source. Kay is really more about moving forward with the future rather than looking back on the past, which is hardly a bad thing. Hell, it's the underlying theme of the game. Still, the thought that Kay gives barely any thought to her own upbringing until it's relevant seems a little concerning. Despite knowing her own strengths, it does suggest that she views herself as largely unremarkable, which, no, Kay, you're fucking amazing. Love yourself, woman. We see more of this as the two uncover the mysteries on Source and the abandoned colonies. The more we discover, the more we're led to believe that Kay probably did come from Source, or at least her parents did. The thing is, she doesn't seem inclined to really think about it unless she's pressed by you. She's curious about everything that's happened on this planet, from the abandoned buildings to the rust, to the fact that the planet is basically blown to shit. Kay seems curious about everything that happened on the planet, apart from how she plays into it. When she finally is pressed on it, Kay comes to grips with the fact that her parents most likely died on Source, while she went on to be an orphan girl at the Apiary, nothing but a medal around her neck to remember them by. She can find comfort in the fact that they seem to love her enough to make sure she survived even if they didn't. Whereas before, when she was led to believe that her parents just didn't want her, now she knows that they actually saved her. I think that encapsulates Kay pretty succinctly as a character. Definitely the most level-headed of the two, but proactive and optimistic in almost everything she does. I love Kay. I want good things for Kay. And I want to try Kay's cooking. It looks so good.
You've never heard of boba nuts?
Boba D's nut. On the flip side, of course, we have you. What? No, not you. You. Totally different. Yu, growing up wealthy and training as an engineer, is very different from Kay. She's cynical, she's sarcastic, she's a bit of a glutton, she's quicker to panic and impulsive action than Kay is. She seldom hesitates to say what's on her mind except when she's afraid Kay is going to be upset. And of course, ever since coming from Source, her impulsive actions have the knock-on effect of her either second-guessing herself a fair deal or just not dealing with looming problems until they start banging down her door. This does not mirror Kay's tendency to be proactive about the future, as she just opts to live in the present until the future becomes unavoidable, which it usually does. And when that happens, she does tend to spiral. And that whole not talking to Kay bit becomes a problem too. By the second act of the game, we learn more about Yu's intended mate, who she's only alluded to with the utmost disdain at this point. It isn't until they risk discovery that she's upfront with Kay about the identity of her mate, Lord Osius, an apiary noble who is apparently infamous for being an unhinged prick. Of course, this secrecy results in their first and only major fight in the whole game. It's something they of course talk about and move past, but it's enough for you to learn that Kay prefers total honesty from her partner, once again showing that clear and consistent communication is key in every stable relationship. Now, all this isn't to say that Yu's the dead weight of the relationship. Far from it. She's a whiz with a wrench and manages to fix their damaged ship with wreckage they just find around the planet. And she provides upgrades to their hover boots and gloves when she has the right equipment. She's very aware of the privileges she had growing up, and while she wasn't happy with her old life, she doesn't pretend that she had it especially hard. She kinda laughs off how angsty and morose she was growing up, almost to the point where it circles back around into self-deprecation, but it's fine. And while she can be a bit of a wet blanket compared to Kay, she does keep her girlfriend from making any rash, unnecessary, dangerous decisions. And she has a bit of a mischievous streak to her, to hilarious results.
Ooh, cupcake.
And if there's one thing that Yu is absolutely certain about, it's that she loves Kay and she hates the Apiary. And those two play into one another a great deal. Her love for Kay exacerbates a lot of the Apiary's issues in her mind, leading her to believe that everyone who just nods and goes along with the matchmaker's whims to be cowardly, non-thinking drones, or power-hungry oligarchs. Hell, she and Kay actually get into an argument about the politics of the matchmaker and if it ever had any value in history. Despite this, however, Yu recognizes that she loves Kay more than she hates the Apiary. She even admits that if it ever came between fixing the Apiary's problems and keeping Kay in her life, she would choose the latter every time. Yu may not be as romantic or as extravagant over her love for Kay, but that love is unmistakably just as strong.
This is terrible. I smell like creamberries. I want to eat myself.
And of course, with every couple, good on their own, but better together. The banter these two have with one another is some of the most adorable I've ever seen in a game. How they each express their love differently but wholeheartedly really adds to their characterization and their dynamic. Kay, as mentioned, is a bit more bombastic and dramatic with her expressions of love, while Yu's love is a bit more on the protective side, making sure that both of them are safe and happy. They compare and contrast personal interests, play games together, listen to each other info dump on their areas of expertise, and comfort each other in moments of stress. There is so much precious couple stuff between these two, it's literally the whole game. I've completed the story several times, and I still haven't uncovered every cute interaction before the point of no return. It is that dense with romance. When they bring up each other's pasts to one another, it's very clear that they are happier now than they've ever been before. Kay recognized the day she met Yu that she would want no one else, and even made plans to run away together should the necessity arise, which landed them both on Source. Yu recognizes that Kay was the first and only person in her life to ever make her truly happy, and she does not want to let that go. They're happy together and they both recognize that their love is worth fighting for. There is tension at times, bickering about small things and arguing about big things, and that's understandable. They're both in a very stressful situation. They fled their home just to be together, and they have to remain in hiding or else they will be separated. All the while they're learning more about themselves and each other, and some of it not always good. The entire game is the biggest stress test their relationship has ever had, and that's what this is about. The problems they face, from Source itself, from the Apiary, from their own shortcomings, and overcoming it all anyway. It's not about sunk cost fallacy. We see throughout the entire game that these two love each other, and despite a few moments of weakness, that doesn't change. They are doing this for each other because they're both committed. The fact that we get these precious couple moments between them, even when the story gets more dire, is proof of that.
I know, but it is so big.
The world is after them, and they'll gladly hold each other through that storm. It helps that these two are actual characters too. Remember, while I said this had similar elements, this is by no means a visual novel. We're not controlling some no-face, blank slate, silent protagonist who maybe has to click through a dialogue tree to sleep with his preferred squeaky-voiced cat girl. Yu and Kay are their own characters, distinct, fleshed out, and fully voice acted. As I said, there are dialogue options, but bear in mind that this ain't no Fallout New Vegas or Mass Effect. The vast majority of choices are simply a matter of flavor dialogue, or a slightly different ending to any individual couple moment. Every now and again, you may come across a choice that gives either Yu or Kay more confidence. That's a metric that's tracked more by the game itself than the player, and it only really affects something that happens once you trigger the point of no return. But right before that happens, you're given a choice that affects which ending you get. There is a bad ending, but I don't have the heart to show it to you. Beyond that, the dialogue options aren't that significant. For those of you who prefer your choices to send echoes throughout eternity, shaking the very foundation of the cosmos with the ramifications, this might come off as disappointing. But you aren't deciding the fate of the galaxy. Hell, you're not even deciding the fate of a city. You're deciding the fate of two people in love. It doesn't have to be more than that. Speaking of the dialogue, if there's one thing that befuddles me about this game, it's their choice of cursing. In place of any actual swears, everyone just says bloot.
Balding bloot.
Away from the apiary, from the matchmaker, and all that bloot.
All right, I'm gonna bloot him up.
Bloot. Ah, bloot.
What the bloot?
It's not a major problem, but it seems to be the only curse they have, and it's kinda lacking in bite. Like, it doesn't feel like a curse. I get that it's a sci-fi setting, but this particular curse word it's left wanting. I feel like we could have just done with a little more. You don't even have to get rid of this word, just add another curse, like, I don't know, flux. That sounds close enough to a swear that we know, and it does have some bite. Flux. Actually, wait a minute, this game is already rated M. Why aren't y'all cursing like sailors?
Piss cakes of a dick.
Anyway, I hope that you like UNK by now, because they're quite literally 50% of the entire cast. Seriously, 50%. And the other 50%, they only get one appearance each. Yeah, they weren't kidding when they said they had to cut a lot of stuff to get this game out. Brief sidebar, both the other characters we see in this game are tied to Yu's past. We don't see anyone from Kei's old life. Not anyone from the foster home, not one of her colleagues. We don't even see what her designated mate looks like. We're only told that she's kinda pretty. I can't help but find this disappointing. Almost everything we learn about Kei's past is in optional dialogues between her and Yu, or is tied to the mystery of the Source Colony, which is all post-mortem. That so much of Yu's past is in the foreground of the story over Kei's just feels imbalanced, and I wish they corrected it. I get that they had to cut a lot of stuff from the original idea, but regardless, they could have very easily avoided this issue. If there was only enough in the budget to cast 2 other characters, it could have been one person from Yu's past and one from Kei's. Easy. Alas, no story is perfect. We can only learn from these mistakes and do better next time. Anyway, in the second and third act, you are introduced to Irena, one of Yu's mothers, and Lord Ozius. Irena is interesting. She obviously cares for both Yu and Kei and wants to make sure they're both alright. At the same time, however, she is absolutely beholden to the laws of the Apiary and the Matchmaker, and says that both of them need to return to their respective mates. She really lays it on thick that what these two are doing is hurting not just the people they left behind, but the entire Apiary as well. According to her, the Matchmaker is the one system that's keeping them away from the, quote, chaotic days of the Mark, and Yu and Kei being together threatens that, which, okay, maybe this system is capable of curbing inequalities, but if a single runaway couple is enough to send the entire thing into jeopardy, then it's not the couple's fault. It's the system's fault. While maybe well-intentioned, Irena dumps an unnecessary amount of guilt onto these two for their actions, which is to say, any guilt. Which is to suggest they did anything wrong. This is especially hilarious considering that Irena had a hand in the planet Source blowing up and killing a bunch of colonists, including Kei's parents, but don't worry about that, I guess. So yeah, Yu's last words to her mother is basically just telling her to shove it. And then there's Lord Ozius. This is a whole other beast entirely. For quite a while, this fucker was hyped up as a malevolent douchebag. So much so that Kei knows him by reputation, and Irena herself speaks of him as someone dangerous that needs to be placated lest they all suffer for it. All this buildup is what informs his behavior when we actually see the bastard. If those earlier discussions didn't occur, a lot of what makes Ozius so slimy might have flown over most people's heads. He speaks calmly, but the things he says matter more than his tone.
What do you want?
Same as ever. You. I know we got off on the wrong foot, you and I, but you have been on my mind constantly, ever since our brief and rowdy encounter last time. The Matchmaker could not have made a better choice for the two of us. And I'm sure that deep down you think so too. What can I say? I'm a sentimentalist. It's just one more thing we have in common.
That will never happen.
And another one. We're stubborn. You see, we're made for each other, you. In time, you'll come to realize that.
You really don't understand, do you?
Oh, yes, you. I understand. I understand not to take you for granted. I even understand the odds look against me. I'm sure my companionship will quickly change your mind. You'll see. And if that's not the case, then too bad. We can always recalibrate.
What?
Goodbye, you. See you very soon.
No, wait, what? What did you just...
He talks almost reverently to Yu, but he still talks to her like she's a possession. He makes a show about being patient and understanding about Yu's reluctance to be with him, but not once does he talk like Yu has any choice in the matter. He talks like an abusive ex trying to manipulate Yu into thinking that he's the one who has to take her back, and that he's just kind and generous enough to do so, the smarmy fucker. This is very much a less is more kind of antagonist. We don't see Ozius do anything especially bad, but we know from how Yu, Kay, and Arena all talk about him that he's a controlling, immoral creep, and that this nice guy act is just to save face. Also, we don't know exactly what this brief and rowdy encounter was that he talks about, but knowing how privileged men behave, I think we can guess. And just when you might have thought that all this could have been just a little too subtle, he then announces that he's traveling to Source and then casually threatens to recalibrate the both of them, essentially erasing their memories of each other. Because that's healthy boyfriend behavior. It's safe to say that the rest of the speaking roles are vehemently against you and Kay staying together. The lesson here, kids, is that you should never talk to people who can talk back. Socialize exclusively with fungus lizards, cow butterflies, and sentient root vegetables. And with that, the stakes are set. If you and Kay are caught by Ozius, they're going to have their minds wiped and return to their previous lives in the apiary, not remembering each other. It's such an utter gut punch of a conflict because of how personal it is. The end goal was never just survival, but staying together, which is a goal that is constantly under threat by the apiary. Plus, I don't think I need to explain why living under a government that is both willing and able to erase years from a person's life right from their brains is a scary notion. So in order to safeguard their relationship and escape the apiary for good, Yu and Kay put everything they learned on Source to the test in one final plan of desperation. Whether or not you go through with this plan after reaching the point of no return determines which ending you get. And as I've said, I'm not going to show you the bad ending. You've kind of already intuited it, but I especially want to talk about the good ending as it's perhaps the most interesting. So in short, Yu and Kay plan to sever the flow bridge on Source. Flow bridges being long beams of cosmic energy that connect planets to each other and allow for interstellar travel. With that severed, the apiary would never be able to reach them. At the same time, of course, that means that Yu and Kay could never leave Source. They could never go to another planet. They can never see another person for the rest of their lives. They would be completely grounded on Source forever. Just them and the nest. That's not a decision anyone could ever take lightly, regardless of the circumstances. Hell, earlier in the game, you can trigger a dialogue between Yu and Kay where they talk about never being able to travel through space.
But without flow bridges, planets would be all isolated from one another.
Yes, of course. I mean, can you imagine the horror? Stuck your entire life on this one planet without a flow bridge, looking up to the infinite sky with its billions of stars and planets, thinking that you'll never even get to touch them, that you'll never know anything else.
Ugh, you just gave me chills.
I'm getting depressed just thinking about it, actually.
All right, let's just try and get this out of our heads.
Yeah, this is a hell of a dilemma. Even if you already know what's going to happen, whichever choice you make, it's still an astounding sacrifice being made. The entire game was about these two running away to be together, and them talking about everything they've left behind. Now they have to decide whether or not to stick to their guns and never go back. To decide once and for all if the world they knew is worth trading for each other. Oh, and it gets even more strenuous. Remember that confidence mechanic in the dialogue? Well, if you go through with the plan, depending on which one of them has the least confidence, this happens. Yeah, they don't sever the flow bridge unscathed. One of them will take a blast of molten rust to save the other and come out scarred for the effort. It's not just a difficult choice. They're literally fighting for their lives to completely do away with anyone and anything that isn't each other. And here's the best part. It's still a happy ending. After the flow bridge is severed, there's an epilogue chapter where you get to see them in their new normal. You plant flowers with your hover boots, have cranberry fondue, which sounds so fucking good. Oh my god, I want to try it. I want to try cranberry fondue. And they talk about the joys of their new humble lives together. No regrets. The worst that happens is one kind of bittersweet talk about the apiary where Yu admits that her old home feels dead to her and that she's kind of numb to the fact. Whether or not it's going to affect her later, she can't tell. Beyond that, they're still happy. Hell, even the whole one of them being deep fried by rust thing is just a minor hurdle for them. This ending hit me a lot harder than I was expecting, and I don't think it could have done that if it wasn't such a personal story. This wasn't about Yu or Kay taking the fight to the apiary and overthrowing the matchmaker. This wasn't about restoring the fractured world of Source or bringing the colonists to justice. It was just about two lovers wanting to be together, and that's all it needed to be. Also, there is a pretty clear theme about never going back home. It encapsulates almost every aspect of Yu and Kay's journey.
You can always pump the brakes, patch things up, pretend, but you can never go back. It's all right though. Sure, we're getting old, but
we're also getting wiser.
Even before the game started, they couldn't go back to being content with the Apiary or the matchmaker's ways because they already knew happiness with each other. They couldn't go back from source even if they wanted to because they just saw too much of what happened from the colonization to ever be okay with the Apiary again. And in the end, whether you or Kay choose to follow through with the plan to sever the flow bridge, or if they choke, they can never go back from either choice. With either ending, there is a finality to the passage of time that you just cannot walk back on. And that's okay. All you can do is just move forward. And in the ideal ending for Haven, you and Kay just move forward together, hand in hand. If you're going to face the unknown of the future, you're better off doing that with someone you love. I fucking love this game. Like, holy shit. I just went on for however long I have, but it just does not matter because at the end of the day, it circles back around to me just going, I love this game. I have played and replayed these two severing that flow bridge so many fucking times, and I'm gonna do it plenty times more. Hell, I might do full playthroughs of the other couples at some point because why not? Like, this video was nearly a year in the making, and I almost had all the footage I needed to collect for it before my hard drive was sabotaged by these fuckers, and I had to get a whole ass other computer. But I did it, and I got that footage all over again, and I loved every moment of it. That is how much I love this game. Like, oh my god. Oh my god.
I thought you knew where you were going.
I know very well where I'm going. Same place as you.
It's not a game for everyone. If you find the casual gameplay wanting or just don't like romance, I can't recommend this game to you, obviously. Its level design is quaint, which is helped along by its lovely art direction, and its mechanics are very casual. If you prefer more plot-heavy stories rather than character-focused stories, if you wanted to know more about the Apiary, how the matchmaker works, or if you wanted to know what the hell the mark was supposed to be, then this game really is playing just the tip with you in regards to its world building. We only ever learn as much as is relevant to you and Kay's story. Edward Sallow is not coming up on Hollow to espouse strongman rhetoric at you in this game. But if none of those are a problem for you, then I absolutely recommend you go play this. Go give some support to the game bakers.
Okay, first of all, they're not bakers, they're pastry chefs.
And this puts me in such a weird position because a part of me wants a sequel for Haven so fucking bad. I want to see more of you and Kay being the most precious couple and beating the odds together. But the ending to this game was just so fucking good, I don't know where you can go from here. I mean, I do have rough ideas in my head about how a sequel to Haven would look, depending on which ending you got, but I have no idea what kind of conclusion these ideas would have, or if they would be a worthy successor to the first game. I mean, even so, you can't help but wonder what could be, right? Maybe we can get a sequel closer to whatever the plans were for the original game? Maybe it can be a prequel and we actually get to see these two meet in the Apiary, fall in love, and then agree to run away together? That'd be cool. Everyone loves a good origin story, especially for romance. It's kind of a paradox, isn't it? You want so much more of a good thing, even when what you had was already so satisfying. I can't help but feel greedy asking for more. At the very least, I would just love to have more people to talk about this game with. Just to expose more people to this beautiful story that succeeds at what it's trying to be. It's no AAA title, that much is certain, but I do think it's worth remembering and being talked about. I just hope that Raylos never sniffed this game out. They'll go on massive Twitter threads about how Kay is an abusive codependent bully partner to you, and that you should totally go back to Lord Ozius and just submit to him and have his babies, and you know exactly why they'd say that. Hey y'all, McKay's still here. I just had a thought that didn't make it into the initial recording, so I thought I'd add it here at the end. I mean, I did brush upon it briefly, but that's irrelevant. I just wanted to talk about how games like Haven, and honestly, romance games in general, are a very underexplored market in the game industry. Now you might be thinking, McKay, how can that be? There are plenty of games with romance in them, and dating sims and visual novels are just about everywhere. They're a cornerstone of Steam's budget, and you're technically correct, but that's not what I'm talking about. Remember, Haven isn't like those other games. You aren't playing custom protagonists or a no-face self-insert. You're not going through dialogues and quest lines to romance a character of choice. Romance isn't just one of many features in Haven, it's the core of the game. I can't remember the last time I ever played a game about two characters in love. I can't recall another game where romance between two established, fully fleshed out characters is the core of the experience and not a tertiary mechanic. Like, think about it. What was the last rom-com game you've ever played? What was the last Hallmark special game you've ever played? Haven is the closest I've seen to a game being a Hallmark movie. I mean, it's not straight enough to be a Hallmark movie, but you know what I mean. There's a difference between a romance game and a game with romance in it. The closest I can think of is maybe Catherine? That's the only other thing that comes to mind, and even that feels like a stretch. God, I just feel guilty trying to include that. Like, What even is that game about? Just, oh, I have to make the existential dreadful choice of whether or not to commit adultery. That's the fucking game. That's literally the game. I'm getting sidetracked. This market is so undersaturated. It's vexing. We have horror games, we have action games, we have slice of life games, we have games that try to combine every genre under the sun. Why don't we have more romance games? I mean, yeah, having more of these games would probably mean having more paint by numbers hetero crap you can expect from AI Hazelwood. But it would also mean more games like Haven. I know romance has a reputation for being disposable dreck, but the fact remains is that it's always been profitable. I don't see why the games industry wouldn't try to tap into that market a little more. I mean, sure, they probably wouldn't see much difference between games like Haven and your typical Otome or whatever the fuck, but still. They just need a few good writers to make a really enjoyable romance, work some game design around it, and you have a viable market. It's not AAA viable, but you can still turn out a profit. And hell, because romance would be the core of the experience, you can have the gameplay be whatever you want. Turn-based, a platformer, a shooter, a romance shooter, that'd be fun. I don't know, maybe gamers can't appreciate a story that they themselves cannot project into. Maybe they look at two characters in love and are so embittered by it that they'd rather exit games than help them find happiness. Maybe games companies don't think a proper romance game would make enough people spam emojis in Twitch chat. Whatever the reason, they're wrong, and I hope I live to see the day that they are proven unanimously wrong.